Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am a Calgary sports fan, and that's what I mostly talk about on my YouTube channel, so if it all sounds like it'd be interesting to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. However, as a CFL fan, and obviously the Calgary Stampeders are my CFL team, well, I'm also interested in what are we going to eventually call Edmonton, as they definitely have had an identity crisis recently. To me, I'm always going to remember them as the Edmonton Eskimos, but given how people's attitudes change and try to be more politically correct, the Edmonton is just now called the Edmonton Football Team, or the EE Football Team. So the Edmonton Football Team dropped their name as the Eskimos, and I'm always obviously interested in what they're going to eventually call themselves, especially when it comes to Labor Day, the Labor Day Classic, where we always like to beat Edmonton on Labor Day, and the rematch, where I like to pack up my red and go up the QE2 to watch Calgary beat Edmonton up there. However, I'm going to look at the short list of names that the Edmonton has proposed on what they are going to call themselves instead of the Eskimos. And then I'm going to rank these 7 names that's on the short list. A couple things to note is that Edmonton wants to keep their iconic double E logo, so all the names that is on this short list will have an E name attached to it. And I just want to see what we're going to call and how I feel looking at, as a CFL fan, which is, I consider myself a CFL fan, and just, how our friends up in Edmonton, what they're going to call themselves, and who we're going to obviously pound on Labor Day. So the 7 names that Edmonton has come up with to replace the Eskimo name, and I mean beyond just, the politically correct and trying to be more inclusive now these days as people's attitudes change. Once you have big sponsors like Ballot Direct, which is the insurance company, I think they are threatening or have pulled out if they did not drop the name, as well as Boston Pizza, another Edmonton-based company. So, and then the fact that, I still like the name Eskimos, given what it means. I mean, it's a proud indigenous group that lives up in northern Canada, and it just fits in, Edmonton being the northern community, but I understand the name change as well, given where society is shifting right now. So here are the 7 names, and talk about each one, and then I'll rank them, because that's what they're giving fans a chance to do. And I'll give you my input, and I'm going to be as transparent as possible, taking off the Battle of Alberta. So there's one name, there's called the Evergreens, the Edmonton Evergreens. What do you think about the potential Edmonton Evergreens? I know that that's a very common generic name. I know that there's another name that ties in their colors. That's why I have green on for my Wiz Smart Bulb. Edmonton, I think they're trying to do is keep the double E logo and the green and gold, as that's their iconic colors, but Evergreens, that could potentially work, being that's in northern Alberta, and green is one of the colors. How about the Edmonton Eagles? I think that name is very, very, cliche, and then there might be a potential, maybe backlash with the fact that you already have the Philadelphia Eagles. I know that, for example, in the CFL, we already have a team called the Lions, the BC Lions, as well as you have the Detroit Lions, but I know that name comes from the fact that if you look at the Vancouver skyline, that you see the 2 mountain peaks. They're called the Lions, but, the Edmonton Eagles could potentially work. I know that, the official provincial bird of the province of Alberta is the great horned owl, so maybe they're thinking of that with the E name, but that's another name that is on the short list. What about the Elk Hounds? I mean, that seems like a different name that, kind of mash 2 animal forces together. The Edmonton Elkhounds, not too sure how that rolls off of the tongue as well. How about the Edmonton Eclipse? Not too sure about that. I mean, maybe they're thinking of the eclipse for the the moon or the sun with their oval-shaped logo. Not quite sure what inspired that name as well, but that is one of the names that's short-lived. I like this one, very interesting, because there actually is some history behind this name, the Edmonton Elk. There is actually some history. If you look back on my Remember the Calgary series, where I talked about some older football teams from the past, for example, let's say the Calgary Bronx, and also even the Calgary Tigers. There was a Calgary Tigers football team, in addition to the hockey team. There was a football team way back in the past where Edmonton used that name, the Elks. So I could see that potentially come back, being used for the current football team, because there actually is some history attached to it. Then, maybe Northern Alberta animal outside the Rocky Mountains. So that is also on the short list. And then here's the kind of the opposite of the Evergreens. There's the Evergolds, which the green and gold is the two colors of the Edmonton Eskimos. It's very similar to the Green Bay Packers as well. But what do you think of the Edmonton Evergolds? I don't know. It just seems to be, sometimes when you have a team that's just named after colors, and we already got the Ottawa Red Blacks, and I know that red and black is one of the iconic colors for the city of Ottawa. And speaking of, Edmonton want to keep their E name, well, Ottawa, they've kept their R name, an R nickname with their teams, the original Rough Riders, and it's two words, difference with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders of one word. And then you had the very short-lived Ottawa Renegades, as I meant to say, and then the Ottawa Red Blacks today. And then the last name, you got the Edmonton Elements. The only thing I could think about possibly with that is maybe the oil sands or the oil and gas. But those are the 7 names that are shortlisted for the Edmonton football team to replace the Eskimo name. So I don't know, what do you think of those 7 names? And where do you think those names derive from, if you're an Edmonton fan or a CFL fan? So those are the names that's on the ballot. So I know that I think they're definitely giving season ticket holders a chance to rank the names. So I'm going to do so myself, give you my take and opinion on the 7 names that I rank from 7 to 1, from my least favorite to most favorite, that I think would be a decent name or a nice name to replace the Edmonton Eskimos. I mean, I'm always going to look at them as the Edmonton Eskimos, or we colloquially call them the Schmoes during Labor Day, and there's some other names, but I'll just leave it out for the purposes of this video to not sound like I'm bashing too much and not to be too controversial. So for my ranking for number 7, I would say my least favorite of the 7 names, I would say the Eclipse. I have Eclipse at number 7. I mean, it's different, but it sounds lame at the same time. When you hear your Edmonton Eclipse, or on Labor Day, led by head coach, well, this upcoming season, assuming we have football, is actually Jamie Elizondo. It's going to sound lame if I say led by head coach Jamie Elizondo. Here are the visiting Edmonton Eclipse. I mean, we'll be booing them either way at McMahon Stadium, especially those who proudly cheer red, just like myself. But I think that sounds a little lame, so I'm going to put that at number 7 for the nickname. Number 6, I got to give it to the Elements. Your Edmonton Elements. Boo, it just doesn't seem the same as the Eskimos, but I'm going to have to think, how would they market that? Come down to Commonwealth to chat an Elements game. I mean, I think that name is inspired from the oil and gas, oil sands, but I have Elements at number 6. So number 5, I put the Eagles. I mean, it sounds like a nice generic name, but there's too many teams named the Eagles. I mean, you already have the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. I mean, there might potentially be some conflict with that, but I mean, you got the same thing with the Detroit Lions and the BC Lions, but it doesn't seem to be much of an issue. But it just seems like it's very outdone, and there's a lot of, community teams named the Eagles. I guess the same with, school teams, but it's in the middle. So then number 4, I put Evergolds. I mean, it's different. It just, celebrates the color of the team. But Evergolds, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, thinking of gold, when the Vegas named their hockey team the Golden Knights, and actually they weren't the first team to be named the Golden Knights. If you go into the World Hockey Association, where the New Jersey team donned that name, but Evergolds, that's the reason I put it in the middle of the list. So I have it at number 4. If I were to rank the ballot to submit to the Edmonton Football Team, as someone who cheers for the Calgary Stampeders and likes the CFL, this is what I put on my ballot. So just ahead of the Evergolds, I like the Evergreens just a little better, because that is the primary color of the Edmonton Eskimos. I mean, you could do a lot of different marketing with that. The Evergolds or the Evergreens, I mean, I think that's just northern Alberta. Evergreens sounds a little better than Evergolds, in my opinion, but this is just my sports fan's opinion as a Calgary sports fan who likes to, pound on Edmonton and the team that I always cheer against. Love to hate on Labor Day. So the number 2, well, Elk Hounds. I mean, that sounds very, very interesting. Is that a mashing of 2 animals, meaning the Edmonton Elkhounds? And then obviously number 1, I have to say, if these are my 7 options, if this is going to replace the Edmonton Eskimos name, I'm going to have to say they have to go with the Edmonton Elk. Just because I go back to the fact that there has been teams in Edmonton sports history that donned the name the Edmonton Elk. I mean, I think they was Elks when it comes to the old rugby and football team. But I think that is the best name of the 7 names that's on the short list. So to recap, if I were to officially send a ballot, if they asked me, Brett Hornby, as someone who cheers the Calgary Stampeders, and this is my biggest rival team in the Battle of Alberta, and if Edmonton was interested in what my 7 ranking from least to most favorite, well, recap: number 7, I put the Eclipse. Number 6, I put the Elements. Number 5, I put the Eagles. Then the number 4, I have the Evergolds. Number 3, I have the Evergreens. Number 2, I have the Elk Hounds. And number 1, my favorite of the 7 proposed nicknames that's on the short list to replace the Edmonton Eskimos is the Edmonton Elk. And that's just because of the history that is in Edmonton sports, that there has been teams in the past that used that name, and just the nature around northern Alberta when it comes to animals in the wild. So I like the Edmonton Elk the most. That just sounds nice and generic and different at the same time. Still gonna boo them. To me, they're always gonna be called the Edmonton Eskimos. It's just a matter of changing the name. If I could find the graphic, apparently there was a decent, could be an alternate logo that they could use for the Edmonton Football Team if they do decide to go with the Elk name. Is that it looks like a nice alternate logo that they could use. I'm assuming that Edmonton is planning on keeping the double E oval shaped logo. I think that's been the intent the whole time, hence why they're keeping the color scheme, and then the fact that they want to keep the E name. But that's my opinion. Those are my favorite ranking, those 7 names. But I'm going to ask you people out there, regardless if you're a CFL fan or not, or if you have any vested interest in Edmonton or not. I mean, I do partially as a Calgary sports fan, and this is a team and Saskatchewan are definitely the 2 teams I get most up for as a football fan, and hopefully in 2021 I'll actually get to have some Canadian football to enjoy. But I mean, I can understand, I can see both views of why Edmonton has decided to change their name. I mean, it's just people's attitudes and views have changed over time. I know that other teams that are likely going to be changing their name, well, already the Washington Redskins, they changed their name, especially when FedEx eventually pressured Washington to drop the name, and that name's been controversial over the years. So now they're still called the Washington Football Club or Football Team, and they're in search for a new name as well. I know that in baseball, when it comes to the Cleveland team, well, I think this is the last year that the Cleveland is going to keep the Indians name, and they're looking to change that logo. I mean, their logo is a smiling, chief, but you got to wonder with these names changing. I think the Atlanta Braves, they're probably going to be due to change the name, especially when they use the tomahawk, the tomahawk shot in Atlanta. But same with the Kansas City Chiefs. They use that same tomahawk chalk, and then as a hockey fan, even though it's an iconic logo, you got the Chicago Blackhawks, even though it was named after the Blackhawk, when it comes to a fighter plane, they happen to use. But I know that all these teams, including Edmonton, they also try to reach out more in that particular community. But, to me, it's always going to be the Eskimos. But eventually, whatever name they choose, it'd be the same reaction. I'm always going to give an Edmonton team. But go with the Elk. I think that is my favorite of the 7 nicknames. But I'll ask, what is your favorite of the 7? And where do you rank them? So anyway, as I like to say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fans journey, home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, who we always beat, or most of the time lately beat on Labor Day, is Edmonton, whatever they happen to call themselves, going down the road in the future. So I mostly do talk Calgary sports, games, recaps, or stories, and I'm going to say this is a sports story that I'm still interested in talking as well, and make another ranking video. But I also do a variety of non-sports content, let's say personal blogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experiences with them on the road at a sporting event. Let's say, for example, on Labor Day, when we play the Edmonton Elk, with the Jets flying over, and then, going up to Edmonton, when I'm thinking we only hate Edmonton here, and then I go up in Edmonton, and I realize they hate us just as much up there. So if that all sounds like be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, you know what you do, just make sure you like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below. For other ways you can follow me, I'm going to say go Stamps go, and I had to wear my helmet toque for Calgary Stampeders just because of the deep freeze that we're in right now, and got to wear this nice hair sweater, which is the original, one of the older vintage logos for the Calgary Stampeders that you might see around. I know the Edmonton Eskimos logo had a different font, but that logo has been iconic in the CFL for over 7 years, but it's definitely a big deal that they had an identity crisis, and we're going to be changing to something else. I like the Elk the most, but that's just my opinion. So I'm going to say go Stamps go, and I'll see you in the next video. And I think my next video, when it comes to CFL and football content, I'll recap Free Agent Frenzy, what happened in the 2021 first days of Free Agent Frenzy, who the Calgary Stampeders picked up and lost, as well as all the other 8 teams in the CFL. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, and come up with a name here quickly, Edmonton, so we know who we beat on Labor Day. So thank you.